Welcome to 27 Topics. With us today we have a very special guest, Bob Vogler, who is in the Counseling Center at Memorial Hospital. Bob, we welcome you here this morning.
Thank you, Paul.
And one of the topics that I think we have not touched on, at least not in the last couple of years, that we today want to touch, and that is bipolar disorder. Can you tell us a little bit about what the sickness or the illness is?
Yes, I can, Paul. I want to refer to this little book. It's an abridged version of what psychiatrists use when they're trying to diagnose people who come to see them. And this is a small version. It's a desk reference we use a lot. And I want to just go through for your audience some of the symptoms of what is known as a manic episode. And this type of episode is, it's hard to miss when somebody who has bipolar disorder is having one of these. You will know something is going on. So let me just run through. There are 7 items that are used to help make a diagnosis. Okay, so the first one is a person who has an inflated self-esteem or grandiose thinking. I'm the best salesperson in the company, when in reality the person may in fact not be. It's just one example. Number 2, a decreased need for sleep. Many times people in a manic episode can go for several days without being able to sleep. And any of us who go for a few days without sleeping, something is going to happen in our bodies which is not particularly good. Number 3, more talkative than usual, or a pressure to keep talking. In a certain sense, when a person is in this kind of an episode, they can't shut up, and no one can shut them up, so to speak. There's a pressure there to keep talking. Number 4, there's a flight of ideas, or a subjective, the person may say, my thoughts are going fast, racing, going so fast I can't keep track of them. Number 5, there's a distractibility that happens when a person is in a manic episode like this. So instead of being able to focus on what is maybe being talked about at work or at home or in wherever the person is, this person in a manic episode you will see them jumping from topic to topic or from person to person and forget what they primarily were trying to do right at that point. Number 6, there will be an increase in goal-directed activity, socially or at work. It could even be sexual, or it could be psychomotor agitation. So they would be very active. They might, during episodes like this, decide that they're going to make more sales calls than anybody else, or do more kinds of work than anyone else, or they may begin doing things just in an extreme manner, trying to do it fast, trying to do it better, quicker, more of it than others. And in reality, they may not be that effective when they're trying to do that. And lastly, number 7, the people who are in a manic episode like this, you will find that they may be involved in excessive pleasurable activities that have a high potential for painful consequences. For example, buying sprees, sexual indiscretions, foolish business investments. Sometimes when people are in episodes like this, gambling becomes a bigger issue, drinking can become a bigger issue, drug use can become a bigger issue, and even speeding can become, when a person is manic like this, they're going to get wherever they can go as fast as possible, and they can become a danger to themselves, so to speak. And what I notice and others notice is when people are in this kind of a phase, they have little awareness of the actual danger that may be involved or the consequences that may be involved in the activities that they're actually engaging in. So lack of awareness, too, is something that you see in a person who's in a manic episode. So that's one phase of the illness. The other phase of it is when a person, for no reason that you can see in the environment around them, changes from that kind of a scenario to where everything now seems to be okay. And you wonder what happened. How did the person go from this outrageous kind of a presentation down to a standard way of being? And there's no explanation for the change that you can see. Then the person at what we would maybe refer to as a baseline, then a few days later, a few weeks later, or a few hours later, depending on the severity of their bipolar illness, that person could now, instead of having tremendous, overwhelming, outrageous energy and all that, now it goes the opposite direction. And now they can't get out of bed. They have no energy. They have no interest in anything. They are suicidal. They feel guilty. They feel worthless. And that may last for a while, and then that may change, and then they might come back to their baseline. And so the person then is subject to a changing mood that is not connected to anything in the environment, and they can't predict when that's going to happen. So a person they could be up, they could be baseline, they could be down, and be switching back and forth without any awareness that that's going to happen today or this hour. And so in that sense, people who have bipolar disorder, that in other ways, it is very disconcerting. Even persons who are under medication management by a psychiatrist can still have these episodes happen. Hopefully, they won't be as extreme because the medication should help the highs from going too high and the lows from going too low and keep them more in a narrower range of movement up and down. But a person who is not on medication, those manic to depression changes are extremely disconcerting. And it makes it very difficult for example, say you have a student who has this, and children do have this disorder, and that child is in school, say he's a sophomore in high school, and he's trying to pay attention to what's going on there, and his mind is in that manic phase like we're talking about, or in the depressed phase like we're talking about. That student is going to have a hard time learning and being available socially with his buddies and girlfriends and boyfriends and teachers and other staff in the school. So it's a very disconcerting disorder. And people who have it, especially, well, everyone I've ever known who has had bipolar illness hates that they have it because it is so consuming, it takes so much time and effort to stay on the medication, and even then, that it can fail, and they then have to kind of start over with a new medication arrangement with their psychiatrist, and that all takes time, and they become very frustrated. So that's a little bit about that disorder. And I did quote those 7 issues right out of this book, which is what psychiatrists use. And we refer to this all the time. And I do want to say about bipolar disorder, there are degrees of severity. You will have people who have minor moods switches like that. And then you have people I've known people who have those moods changes every hour. And they are unable to work or really be productive because their mind cannot stay focused. Their behavior becomes outrageous. So the degree of severity needs to be noted as well. And by the way, I don't think you can name a walk of life that we all would know of that I don't know someone in that walk of life who is bipolar. and they are working. I know judges, teachers, lawyers, doctors, pick somebody, who any profession, any line of work, and there are people there on medication, doing fairly well, struggling with it sometimes, and then there are others whose disorder is so severe they really cannot work. And one lady is a Purdue graduate that I can think of, known her for 20 years. She has never worked more than 1 week at a time since she graduated from Purdue with a degree. And I don't even know how she got the degree, because she is really smart. She is bright, but her bipolar disorder is so severe, she goes manic, and she tends to be manic, but she also gets down. And she has been hospitalized, I would say, 4 or 5 times in her adult life. So hospitalization is part of that picture too, and that's disconcerting.
So what do people do when they have this? I mean, what makes them come into the doctor?
Okay, here's some things.
Because like you're saying, they're pretty good, they're pretty high, and then all of a sudden they're in depression, then they come back to normal.
Right. Here's what happens sometimes. These are just observations that people might make about somebody and not really know what's going on with this person. So you might notice their temperament. Certainly if this person is married, that spouse will know that temperament and see that one day this person is fine. The next day or next week, all of a sudden everything is really hyped up. They're sitting up in the middle of the night when they should be in bed sleeping, and they're not sleeping, and they'll say, I can't sleep. Or they'll start going to work early, they'll start doing things a little different than they had been. So that temperament. Then you will notice sometimes with some people there is a voice volume control issue. The lady I was talking about who has the degree from Purdue, her voice could pierce concrete. When her voice would get elevated and she had no awareness of how loudly she was talking, that would get your attention in a family situation. She also has, and people who have, when they're in these phases, have little awareness of the situation that they're actually in. So everybody else is kind of aware that grandma's sleeping over there and this and that's going on and dogs barking. And the person who's in a manic phase like this seems to be unaware of that, kind of, just not totally involved in their brain, so to speak, and not aware of all those things going on. Also, they, in those kinds of phases, they don't see what we would refer to maybe as a big picture. They're focused on whatever it is that their mind is focused on right then, to the exclusion of all those other things. They don't do this on purpose, but that's just the way it happens. Inability to calculate consequences, we've talked about that before. That's a big one, and family members would see that. Sometimes people, when they're manic like this, have a tremendous amount of fantasy and dysfunctional imagination. So when you have a family member and you're seeing those things, one day it's like that, fantasy world. The next day they're so depressed they can't get out of bed. Eventually people start to say, what is wrong with mom or dad or my sister, my brother, whoever it is, and children. And so then eventually they end up at the doctor, and eventually the family doctor hopefully will then refer them to a psychiatrist.
Is there some kind of help group or in the area that people associate with? Or?
Yeah. In that regard, I didn't mention earlier, but as to how it is for a person who is bipolar, how that is for them, very often when they are in that depressed phase, you will find that they feel so depressed that they actually do become suicidal. And so in 2001, we decided at Memorial Hospital to do a few things. We decided to offer a support group for our people and their families with bipolar illness. And we did it for several reasons. One, to give people who have the disorder and their family members a place where they could come and talk to others and to the degree of their own comfort about their experience with this. And usually a lot of those discussions center around what kind of medicine are you on, and is that working? It didn't work for me, but is it working for you? Secondly, we wanted to do some education of the patients and their family members, and also the community. Usually when you say bipolar, and if you hear news stories sometimes, when news organizations get hold of that word bipolar, all of a sudden you have a maniacal killer. That's not true. I mean, there may be some of those, I don't know, but people with bipolar disorder are your next door neighbors, and they're people that we all know and care about. And just because they're bipolar does not mean that they're going to be doing something dangerous or something like that. The behavior, however, can be challenging. So we wanted to inform the public, inform the families and the patients how best to go about that. And one of the things that people who've attended our support group have told me, and I've been there for the 99% of those meetings. I started it and I am still doing it. They have said to me what helped them the most was hearing other people with the disorder describe their experiences, and they could say, it wasn't just me. So you had that too, and you were in jail because you were drinking too much, and they finally figured out I was bipolar. And that, by the way, is a fairly common scenario. Also, at that time, in 2001, actually starting in 1997, there was a series of suicides in our county. And Memorial Hospital began looking into what was happening with that. I happened to be one of the people doing that. And eventually, we realized that people who were committing suicide had depression, or they had a diagnosis of bipolar disorder. So that was also an issue to help in a preventive type of situation to prevent people from killing themselves. A lot of whom I have known, by the way, and it's sad even today talking about that, to realize that so-and-so committed suicide and possibly was not in treatment and could have been and maybe would still be living today. So,
Bob, our time is just about up.
Okay.
The thing that would be is, when does the group and where does the group meet?
The group meets on the third Tuesday night of the month at 6:30 in the Acorn Room, which is right off the cafeteria in its current location at the hospital. When the cafeteria moves, I don't know where we're going to go, but that's where it is. Third Tuesday night from 6:30 to 8. People use first names only. We do ask everyone to be confidential, and everybody is great about that. And you do not have to say any more than you want to. I am there to help and to kind of facilitate what happens there. So,
Bob Vogler, Memorial Hospital Counseling Center. This morning's topic, bipolar disorder. We want to thank you for coming in and informing us, and appreciate you being here today.
thank you very much, and I appreciate you asking me to come in. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Okay.